The Greek line was already breaking when Hector saw the men still standing in his path. Agamemnon had been wounded. Greek commanders were leaving the battlefield, and the Trojans were advancing behind the greatest defender of Troy. Only two famous warriors remained close enough to slow the collapse: Diomedes and Odysseus. They could retreat with the rest of the army. Instead, they turned toward Hector, raised their spears, and waited. Within minutes, Diomedes would come within the thickness of a bronze helmet of killing him. Then a single arrow would remove Diomedes from the battle, leaving Odysseus alone, surrounded and fighting for his life. What happened when Hector's greatest counterattack finally reached the man who would one day destroy Troy? This episode comes from Book 11 of Homer's Iliad. It is epic poetry, not a verified battlefield report. Gods influence events, warriors perform extraordinary feats, and the outcome of combat is often described through divine favor. But beneath the myth is a recognizable military crisis. Achilles has withdrawn from battle after his conflict with Agamemnon. The Greek army still possesses experienced commanders, but it no longer has the warrior most feared by Troy. Achilles' absence has not yet destroyed the Greek army. It has removed its final margin of safety. On this morning, however, the Greeks do not begin as the losing side. Agamemnon arms himself and leads a violent offensive across the plain. The Trojans are pushed backward toward their city, while Hector waits for the balance of the battle to change. In Homer's story, Zeus sends the goddess Iris with instructions for Hector. Avoid confronting Agamemnon while the Greek commander remains in the front line. Hector's opportunity will come only after Agamemnon is wounded and leaves the battlefield. The divine message belongs to myth. Its military meaning is clear. Do not attack the enemy at his strongest point. Wait until the command structure weakens. Agamemnon continues his advance until Coon, a Trojan warrior seeking revenge for his fallen brother, strikes him through the arm with a spear. The wound does not remove him immediately. Agamemnon kills Coon and continues fighting, but as the wound stiffens and the pain becomes unbearable, he climbs into his chariot and orders his driver to return to the Greek ships. The offensive loses more than a single fighter. It loses the commander whose presence has been driving it forward. Hector sees Agamemnon's chariot leaving the battlefield. He does not hesitate. He calls to the Trojans, Lycians, and Dardanians. The strongest Greek currently facing them is gone. The moment has arrived to turn defense into attack. Hector moves among the foremost ranks rather than directing the battle from safety. The Trojans recover their confidence, turn back toward the Greeks, and begin striking down both leaders and ordinary soldiers. The direction of the battle changes. Minutes earlier, Troy had been falling back toward its gates. Now the Greeks are retreating toward their ships. A retreat can remain organized as long as someone controls its speed. But once every soldier believes the men beside him are running, withdrawal becomes panic. Formations open. Shields are abandoned. The pursuing army no longer needs to break a defensive line because the line has already disappeared. Odysseus recognizes the danger. He calls to Diomedes and asks whether they will allow Hector to reach the Greek ships without resistance. Diomedes agrees to stand, although he believes the advantage has already passed to Troy. The two warriors turn against the movement of their own army. They are not literally the only Greeks fighting across the entire battlefield. But at this point in the line, they become the center of resistance. They strike down Trojan warriors and disrupt the pursuit. Their stand gives retreating Greeks a moment to breathe and reform farther behind them. This is Odysseus before the wooden horse. There is no disguise, no hidden chamber, no false identity. His intelligence still matters, but it cannot replace the shield in his hand. To survive Hector's advance, Odysseus must fight in the open. Hector notices the damage being caused by Odysseus and Diomedes. The two men are not winning the battle. They are doing something more immediately dangerous to Hector's plan. They are slowing the collapse. Every minute they remain in position gives the Greeks additional time to recover near the ships. Every Trojan warrior forced to turn toward them is one less man pressing the retreat. Hector therefore leads the attack toward their position. The Trojan ranks follow him. Diomedes sees the movement approaching. He understands that this is no scattered group of pursuers. Hector himself is coming, supported by formed Trojan troops. Diomedes warns Odysseus. Then he makes the decision that nearly changes the entire story of Troy. He does not wait for Hector to reach them. He raises his spear and throws it. The spear strikes Hector at the top of his helmet. Bronze meets bronze. The weapon does not penetrate, but the force of the impact throws Hector backward. He falls to his knees, places one hand against the ground, and loses awareness for a moment. Troy's greatest commander is down in the middle of his own counterattack. If the spear had passed through the helmet, the consequences could have extended far beyond Hector's death. The Trojans had only just recovered from retreat. Their renewed confidence depended heavily upon Hector's voice, presence, and willingness to fight in the foremost ranks. Losing him at that moment might have stopped the attack before it reached the Greek ships. But the helmet holds. In Homer's epic, it is described as a 3-layered helmet given to Hector by Apollo. The divine connection belongs to the mythical framework of the poem, but the physical protection is central to the scene. Diomedes moves forward to recover his spear. Before he can reach Hector, the Trojan commander regains consciousness, returns to his chariot, and escapes into the formation behind him. Hector has survived because of a layer of bronze and a few seconds of distance. The counterattack continues. Diomedes turns back toward the fighting and begins removing armor from a fallen Trojan warrior. That moment of exposure gives Paris his opportunity. From a protected position near the ancient burial mound of Ilus, Paris draws his bow and releases an arrow. It passes through Diomedes' right foot and fixes itself in the ground. The wound is not fatal, but it removes him from the position. Paris is often remembered as the prince whose actions helped begin the war, or as the weaker contrast to Hector. But here his weapon produces a direct tactical result. Diomedes is the man who nearly killed Hector. He is also the strongest fighter, standing beside Odysseus. Paris does not need to defeat him in close combat. He only needs to make him unable to remain. Odysseus steps in front of Diomedes, shielding him while the wounded warrior pulls the arrow from his foot. Diomedes then climbs into his chariot and withdraws toward the ships. The stand of 2 men becomes the stand of 1. Odysseus looks around and realizes that no Greek remains immediately beside him. Diomedes is leaving. The army has been scattered. Trojan shields are closing from several directions. For a brief moment, Odysseus debates with himself. If he runs, he may survive, but his flight could become another signal that the position has completely failed. If he stays, he may be surrounded and killed. This is not the Odysseus who already knows the complete plan. He does not know whether help is coming. He does not know how many Trojans are moving around him. He has no clever device that guarantees his escape. He only knows that a leading warrior is expected to hold his ground, whether he strikes an enemy or is struck himself. So he stays. The Trojans surround him. Odysseus fights aggressively, trying to prevent the circle from closing completely. He kills several attackers, using each charge to create space rather than simply waiting behind his shield. But every man he defeats draws more attention toward his position. The longer he survives, the more clearly the Trojans understand that he is alone. Among the warriors who approach is Socus. Odysseus has already killed Socus's brother, Charops, and Socus now attacks to avenge him. His spear passes through Odysseus's shield and armor, tearing into his side. In Homer's telling, Athena prevents the weapon from reaching his internal organs. The divine protection belongs to myth. The wound does not. Odysseus is bleeding, and the Trojans can see it. He strikes back as Socus turns away, driving his spear through the man's back and chest. But when Odysseus pulls the Trojan spear from his own body, the blood begins to flow more heavily. The soldiers around him call to one another and press forward together. Until this moment, Odysseus has remained dangerous enough to make them cautious. Now they know he is weakening. He begins giving ground and calls for help. Not once, 3 times. Menelaus hears the calls. He turns to Ajax and tells him that Odysseus appears to have been cut off and overwhelmed by the Trojans. The 2 warriors move toward the sound. They find Odysseus wounded and surrounded. Ajax advances with the enormous shield for which he is famous. Homer compares it to a city wall. His arrival changes the local balance immediately. The Trojans do not need to be destroyed. They only need to be forced backward far enough to open an escape route. Ajax creates that space. Menelaus reaches Odysseus, takes him by the hand, and leads him from the fighting until a chariot arrives to carry him away. Odysseus survives. But the position is lost. Ajax remains behind and continues attacking the Trojans, while Hector fights elsewhere along the line. The rescue saves a commander. It does not stop Troy's advance. Hector did not kill Odysseus. Odysseus did not stop Hector. Diomedes nearly killed the Trojan commander, but nearly has no value once Hector returns to his chariot and the attack continues. From a tactical perspective, Odysseus and Diomedes accomplish something important. Their stand interrupts the pursuit and gives the retreating Greeks time. Odysseus also remains alive long enough for Menelaus and Ajax to reach him. But from a wider battlefield perspective, Hector gains the more important result. Agamemnon leaves the battle. Diomedes leaves the battle. Odysseus leaves the battle. Other important Greek fighters are also wounded as the struggle continues. Hector has not destroyed the Greek army, but the men most capable of organizing its resistance are disappearing from the field one after another. This is how an army can begin to collapse, not always in one dramatic break. Sometimes it happens one commander at a time. This battle belongs to the rising phase of Hector's story. He has not yet killed Patroclus. Achilles has not yet returned seeking revenge. Hector is still advancing toward the greatest opportunity Troy will receive during the war. His goal is larger than defeating Odysseus or Diomedes. He wants to reach the Greek ships. Those vessels are not merely transportation. They are the invasion army's connection to the sea, its route of retreat, and the physical symbol of its ability to escape Troy. If Hector can break the defense around them and burn the fleet, the Greeks may be trapped between the Trojan army and the water. Odysseus understands that danger when he first turns toward Diomedes. That is why their stand matters. They are not simply defending a piece of ground. They are defending the remaining distance between Hector and the ships. They fail to stop him permanently, but they force him to fight for every step. This encounter shows Hector and Odysseus before the events that will ultimately define them. Hector appears as a battlefield commander at the height of his momentum. He waits for weakness, recognizes Agamemnon's departure, rallies a shaken army, and leads the counterattack from the front. But the same choice exposes him. One spear nearly removes Troy's most important defender from the war. Odysseus appears without the weapon for which he will later become famous. There is no deception to protect him. He has only discipline, judgment, and the decision to remain when retreat would be easier. He survives not because he defeats everyone around him, but because he holds long enough for others to reach him. Years later, tradition will remember Odysseus as the mind behind the fall of Troy. But before he could defeat Hector's city from inside its walls, he first had to survive Hector's advance in the open field. Odysseus lived through the charge, but survival was not victory. By the time he left the battlefield, the road to the Greek ships was opening, and Hector was still advancing.